A couple questions up front. Yes, there are LED lights baked into this jacket. I do have an off switch in case it becomes too much. Really glad to see everybody here. Today is going to be a fun session. I'm Marc Bernstein. I'm the CEO at Balto, and we are the leader in a technology called real-time guidance. Quick show of hands, who here has heard of real-time guidance? Cool. How about agent assist? How about next best action? We're hearing a lot of that technology coming up in this CCW. I can tell you a couple years ago, before the pandemic, it was whispers in terms of real-time guidance and agent assist. And it's the ability to guide agents to be as effective as possible in every conversation. So we built a technology that automatically analyzes the conversation and gives agents recommendations based on the voice stream in real time on their computer screen to be as effective as possible. And the reason we use the term real-time guidance versus real-time agent assist is because the concept of guidance, of helping people do the right thing in the right moment, extends past the agent. It's not just about the agent doing the right thing in the moment, it's also about the supervisor raising their hand and getting a notification when they need to do some action in the moment. It's about the QA team being able to QA calls not 30 days later. Quick show of hands, who here has about a 2-week lag time in their QA process? No one. 1 week. Pretty standard. How about same day? Yeah. So what happens when you can QA calls immediately, the second that they happen, literally right while they're happening? What sort of opportunities does that bring up for compliance and to enhance performance, and maybe an agent is having a slump that day and they just got back from lunch break and they've had 3 bad calls in a row? What if you can stop it right then and there and make sure that they're doing good in the next call? So that's fundamentally what we've invented. I'm the CEO. We are about a 5-year-old company. And today, by the end of the session today, everybody should have a handful. That whiteboard or these stand-up sandwich boards should be full with tangible ideas for how we can take the KPIs that everyone is trying to move and move those KPIs in your contact center at scale. So one, how do we take the KPIs that we want to move and actually make that happen? And the second is, how do we take your company strategy that you have and make sure that your contact center and your customer conversations are reflecting the company strategy? So a couple quick questions about everyone's backgrounds. Who here is on the customer care side of the organization? Okay, about maybe a little over a third. How about the QA side? How about sales? 1, 2, 3, 4. Marketing? The 2 lonely marketers, welcome. And then how about the contact center management and operations? Cool. So we'll focus there for today. Before we jump into a couple of activities that I have planned for everyone, I'd love to introduce Phil Bennett. Phil is one of our first customers at Balto. I think we've been working together for around 4 or 5 years or so.
Correct, yeah.
And Phil, do you want to give a quick bit on your background?
Sure. So my name is Philip Bennett. I'm a Customer Service Operations Manager for Empire today. I use the title a little bit tongue-in-cheek because I don't answer to customer service, I don't do any operations, and I don't manage anybody. But it's a great title, so I love it. Other than that, my role in the contact center for Empire today was to come in and modernize it, upgrade our processes, tools, equipment, channel partners, things like that, and really bring in good ones that will change it, keeping in mind that we're a 60-year-old company that has a 800 number jingle that now you'll probably can't get it out of your head if you grew up with it, and are very, very resistant to change, especially when we're talking about talking to our customers, because the only way to talk to the customer is on the phone. And so, yes, you have to be very respectful of that, but how can we move the needle and how can we move into the 21st century? So that's who I am, and I met Marc on a LinkedIn message board, believe it or not. We were in a group called Humans First, And they were talking about the coming AI apocalypse. You know, we're all going to be replaced by machines. We're all going to be put out to pasture. And my general comment, I think, that got Marc involved was I said that wasn't going to happen. I said there'd be displacement. Yeah, there's no question about that. But that AI was going to pair with agents and make them better than the sum of the two parts. And at that point, Marc reached out and he said, hey, I'd like to show you something. And so we've been working together ever since.
Thank you so much, Bill. So I have one more very wonderful volunteer. This is Julie. Woohoo! Julie's our creative director. This is where the jackets came from. This is where the laser, if anyone was able to see our booth, came from. This is where every idea that makes a lot of sense, but not 100% sense, but is worth trying, comes from Julie. So, and Julie today is going to fill in one of my key gaps, which is I hope I'm a better CEO than I am a scribe. So Julie, thank you for volunteering and being our writer here.
Yeah, of course. And after this, you guys should all check out the laser. I begged the company to get it, so please make it worth it.
Thank you. So the concept that we're going to explore is how do you take something that you want to change in your contact center, something you want to change in your customer conversations, you devise a map of how you want to do it, and then how do you, in not months or quarters or years, actually go make it so in your customer conversations that is happening and driving an impact on your metrics. So to start, let's lay out a couple of the metrics that we're all thinking about. If folks would mind just shouting out a couple metrics that are top of mind that you're trying to drive now or specifically drove in the past year. If you want to shout them out, Julie will write those up. Conversion rates. Wrap time.
Total calls handled.
Total calls handled. Very cool. What industry are you in?
We're in the EHR industry.
Okay.
Our contact center is almost all independent.
Very cool. And you want total calls handled to go? Gotcha.
Pickup rate.
Pickup rate. Very cool. Closed tickets. And is that a number or a mm-hmm. Say again? Feedback type in terms of how customers are giving feedback to your company, or? Got it. Yes?
Post-order issue future purchase.
Post-order issue future purchase. I've not heard that metric before. Could you describe that a little bit?
So within the customer service solving problem process,
Yep.
I'm in flower business, which is they call in because there's a problem. The metric we're measuring is, does that customer repurchase?
Mm-hmm.
Our LTV we're trying to get to, LTV is the metric, but you can't translate LTV
LTV?
to agent action.
Yeah.
You just can't.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our version of LTV. LTV is the agent value. So our customer purchases 1.1 flower bouquets a year. We want to increase that number. One. Two,
Mm-hmm.
to get people to purchase more, and if they call for a problem, that agent wows them to
Yeah.
the point that they buy it.
Very cool. So I heard a lot of different metrics there. I heard LTV. I heard number of repeat purchases or repeat purchases per customer. There's repeat purchases per time. You could even think about a number of purchases per interaction, right? And then there's also a retention component to it. Yep. Who here is thinking top of mind about customer retention? I'd expect so. Cool. So these are some of the things. Would you mind putting retention here too, please? And then let's also add some of the classics. And everyone nowadays, I'm hearing debate AHT. Is it good? Is it bad? I'll tell you my hot take. I think actually reducing AHT is still a good thing if done properly because it's good for the customer. The customer doesn't want to spend unneeded time with your customer care team. So obviously there's a balance. You don't want to reduce AHT at all costs, but is it a metric we should throw out the window? My hot take is probably not. I think most folks here would agree, but it's definitely fun in a speaking event to say throw out your AHT metrics. So then now, Julie, if you'd mind putting a line right down the middle here. And I'm going to ask you to either write something on the left side or the right side. And I'd love folks to figure out what the pattern is that I'm trying to establish. So I'm going to ask, what are we actually doing to improve conversion rates, improve calls handled, improve pickup rates? And I'd love feedback and just brainstorming from the audience here. And whenever anyone puts out an idea, I'll say, Julie, would you mind putting that on the left side or mind putting that on the right side? And we'll see what the pattern is that emerges. So let's start with conversion rates. What are folks doing to boost conversion rates? Coaching. Would you mind putting that on the left side, please? What else? Improve call matting. Would you mind putting the left side again, please?
Agent training.
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 Agent training. And I heard finding. Yep. Would you mind putting that on the right side? Finding information in the knowledge base. Awesome. Let's do LTV. What are we doing to improve LTV? What are the initiatives that we have in play? Upsell. Would you mind putting upsells on the right side, please? What else? Campaign effectiveness. Would you mind putting that on the right side, please? Let's do one more. Let's do AHT. What are we doing to try to reduce handle time? There's a lot of things. Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Knowledge base, pop-ups, and automation. Could you actually put all those on the right side, please?
Visibility to hold times, dead air,
Yep.
disposition.
More self-service.
We try to improve agent knowledge that tends to, or incompetence knowledge of the product, so that drives handle time down, so they don't need to spend time looking.
Awesome. Would you mind putting agent knowledge on the right? And then self-service on the left, please. And then I think I missed somebody's. Whose did I miss?
Disposition.
Dispositions. And actually, how dispositions?
Specifically, just logging down the different reasons we're trying to solve for in that call, see which ones take the longest over the others
Yep.
for solutions.
And then do what with it?
And then through that, I can train my agents on the ones that take the longest and see what we can come up with to reduce that.
Awesome. So it seems like it's looking at the dispositions, analyzing which dispositions have the highest amount of handle time, and then converting that into training for agents so they were able to handle those queries faster.
Yeah, or maybe there's process gaps that I don't know about in those. that
Yep.
we can solve.
Yep.
Process gaps. Let's put dispositions on the left side, please. Okay, I don't know if the pattern, anything else actually jump out to people yet? I'm not sure if the pattern is clear yet. I'd love everyone's guesses. What are we putting on the left side, and what are we putting on the right side? You said left side is things that AI can.
Right side is things that the AI could assist an agent through if it's monitoring the call and basically serving up what they can do next.
Yeah, you're totally right. He said the right side are things that an AI can assist agents with live on the call. The left side is not. And I'll actually broaden that a little bit toward a philosophy that we can use in driving metrics. It really breaks down into two different ways you can drive metrics. You can drive metrics through process, things that you're installing in your business, things like automating and deflecting more calls, things like better transfer of information to the agent when they start the call, so they're fully equipped about why the caller is calling in. Things like improving how you source leads, something that is a process that is not actually related to the conversation itself. So you're either installing a process or you're driving effectiveness through the conversation itself. On one hand, you can set up systems and tools and different workflows to be doing all of that by itself. On the other hand, you need what? What resource is the resource that makes the right side make or break? Say again? Data. Say again, please. Relevant data that absolutely does fuel all the things that are happening in the conversation. But how does the data get used? By the person. The right side is things that are specific to the agent. The left side are things that are specific to your workflows and processes. Now, what's so interesting is I actually expected this to be flipped in terms of where we would see people focus. Because one of the things that we found is that organizations tend not to focus on driving metrics through the conversation, because in some ways the agents ultimately are the ultimate arbiter of whether it actually works or not, right? In order to actually drive the metric, the agent needs to take a behavior or do an action or communicate with the customer in a different way, and that tends to be a very challenging bottleneck. So when organizations are looking at improving their processes and buying technology, we're seeing a lot of organizations focus on improving the right side, which means that the things on the left side actually driving agent behaviors are a pretty ginormous opportunity, especially as the contact center is potentially switching a little bit from a cost center to a profit center. So quick show of hands, let me ask a question. Who here believes truly that the contact center is a cost center? Nobody? Because that at least has been the standard viewpoint, right? That you need to serve your customers at the lowest cost. Any brave souls say, okay, fine, it's a cost center, I agree. Really? Well, let's talk about that. Who here feels like today their contact center is actually operating as a profit center? Awesome. And what is your name? April. I'd love to hear a little bit of what you're doing. How do you guys, thank you for being a volunteer, how are you guys treating your contact center as a profit center?
So I work in a telecom company, first off, and so we're a small telco company on the island of Guam, but our call center team, we've always had like a sales quota associated with with them, even though they don't actually have a physical store. So that's why I look at it as a sales center and have a quota. And then recently I acquired their customer retention team. It's fairly new, and the reason why we created it is because we really need to focus on retention. Our market's saturated right now. We're a small island, and we have 3 wireless carriers there. So, again, from the retention side of the house, I tried to say, okay, we need to contact customers and find a way to get them to return as well as a full new service with us. So that's why I look at it as a sales opportunity in that regard.
Very cool. So I heard 2 pieces there. The first is almost a sales team that is acting as a traditional sales team. And is that inbound, outbound, or both?
It is outbound primarily.
So then you guys, every time the connect rates change in the market and every time there's a new stir shaken thing that comes out, that probably is top of mind for you.
Yeah, and then we have to, create special promos and everything for that particular customer, segment that we're trying to target in different quarters.
So then what do you do on the retention side? How do you drive retention through the customer conversation?
And that's where, we're here. I think we can be way more efficient. When I'm looking at our conversion rates today, for me, it could be much higher. There's room for opportunity and growth there. And I think part of it is also the efficiency of how we do things. So when you were saying that, the AI, finding knowledge and finding information, that's a pain point for us right now.
Absolutely. So I'll give the group 2 bits of research that Balto conducted over the last year, and then open it up for discussion on how are we practically, through the conversations, whether there's an AI involved or not, through the conversations, how are we driving retention? How are we driving conversions? How are we driving upsells? How are we giving agents knowledge quickly so they're able to reduce their handle times and service customers quickly? The 2 studies. The first is a survey we did with over 1,000 English-speaking contact center agents in the US. And we asked a very simple question to the agents. When you totally bomb a customer conversation, when you made some pretty bad mistake in your customer conversation, what was the reason? What was going through your head? What actually happened? And we gave a whole bunch of options. And one of the options that we kind of put in as a red herring is we said, please choose lack of training. I wasn't trained on this situation. Agents chose that option 12% of the time. Almost 2 times as much, agents said the reason that they made a mistake on their calls was, quote, I forgot the right thing to say. Just blanking, they forgot the right thing to say, and that was 2 times, 22% of all agents said, I forgot the right things to say. Among tenured agents, the number 1 reason was, I got bored and tried to change it up and it didn't work. I got bored was the number 1 reason among agents who had more than 5 years of contact center experience. And then kind of in the middle was I got nervous. And that was does anyone remember on the Balto side what the number was if I got nervous? It was like 18%. Not quite I got bored or I forgot the right thing to say. It was I was nervous and got flustered. So when we're thinking about ultimately the experience that our customers are having, there's all this stuff on the left side that matters, that really, really matters. And there's also the hundreds or thousands, or maybe dozens, or maybe tens of thousands of agents that we have that are getting bored and nervous and forgetting what to say. Just forgetting how to have a conversation when you've been doing this and you're at a 70%, if you're lucky, occupancy, and it's your 7th hour, and you're looking to wrap up for the day, and you have that conversation, you say, oh, I forgot the information I need to give the customer. That's the first study. Then we interviewed the managers. And we interviewed over 500 contact center managers also in the US. And we asked them, when you coach your agents, how many times does it take before they actually use the coaching that you gave them? Is it because it seems like they're forgetting stuff and they're not really using the coaching that you give, at least not 100% of the time? So how many times does it take? Do you coach once and then they just get it perfectly and they're on their way, you never have to worry about it again? Twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? What does everyone think? What is the average number of times that managers said they needed to coach their agents before the agent actually implemented the coaching? 9. Whew. So I hear 9, I hear 3. 9 would be even more of a nightmare than the reality, but The answer was 4.2. 4.2. So wait a minute. They're coaching 4.2 times to get one change. Who here has managers that are coaching, let's say, more than 10 hours a week? Quick show of hands. Okay. So they're not spending most of their time coaching. In that case, I imagine, what are they doing? Actually, I'll ask everyone, what are your managers doing, your supervisors doing, if they're not coaching more than 10 hours a week? How do they spend their time?
So my analytics tell me that some of them spend way too much time live listening on calls. And I've seen people spend like 2,000 calls a month. And I look at it and I go, really, after 3 calls, you should be able to give feedback, wait for a change, give more feedback, wait for a change, give more feedback. And you shouldn't just listen to 248 calls for any quality. So there's a lot of that data coming back happening. Some other stuff as well, some evaluations, some of that kind of stuff. But I do find that a lot of the time, it all comes down to knowledge management. And for us, that's like going to be a big priority, making sure that your knowledge can be surfaced and can be surfaced in a textual way. We're not there yet. We have to actually get the knowledge in one place. And get it in the right place before we can look at the really great technologies that can textually surface them on call. But there's way too much time spent on all stuff that isn't really moving forward.
It sounds like the supervisors are trying to act as this like omniscient force of knowledge management and just listen to everything.
They're the bottleneck for progress, and then they don't need to be. So it's like how do you get them past that? And that's a big thing here.
How else are supervisors and managers spending their time? What does in the trenches look like?
They take calls and do tickets as well as moving escalations.
Calls, tickets, and escalations. So they're your supervisors are spending a lot of their time as super agents. How else? So we found that if managers are spending 4.2 coaching sessions to get one change, and they think that, and they're spending all this time, live listening to calls, all this time in the trenches with agents, that means they're actually spending only 25% of the time coaching, because it takes 4 coaching sessions. And they're actually spending 75% of that time re-coaching stuff that they've already coached on. So there's a 4x opportunity there if we can reduce the number of times that managers need to re-coach agents before they get the skill and implement the change. We also asked managers, what percent of the time do you coach one agent on something and then have to go coach another agent on the exact same thing? So not like individualized personal career progression, but just like disseminating skills throughout the organization. What percent of the time do folks think that managers had to coach another agent on the exact same thing they coached a previous agent on? Let's see, a lot is true. At least 50%. The number we heard was 72%, right? So when we're thinking about knowledge management, one of the things we need to be thinking about is how do we prevent this bottleneck on the side of the managers, of the supervisors, who are having to take the same agent and coach them 4 times to get a change, and then go do the same process with another agent 3/4 of the time. How can we disseminate knowledge better throughout the organization? Something I think we're all thinking a lot about. So if I could turn it over to the group for a second. What are we doing today? And let's kind of get a little bit of a brainstorm going. I'll turn it over to everybody. What are we doing today to drive retention and to drive conversions? And you all have definitely better ideas than I do, so I'd love to hear it.
Incentivization for conversions, commission, that sort of thing.
Could you talk more about that?
Well, I mean, here's the thing. A lot of our agents are incentivized for appointment setting. And so the goal is to get the appointment setting, the appointment set up for the salesman to go out and sell the carpet. And so we incentivize them for every appointment that they get set that actually sits. And so, that's very important to drive conversions. But again, all it is an incentive. So, I mean, it's like your sales team. Okay, we're going to give you a big commission, go out and sell this item. Someone will go out and sell the item, someone won't go out and sell the item, someone will try and sell the item but won't sell the item. I mean, commission will incentivize the conversion, yes, but it really only incentivizes the person that wants that commission, that drives them. And other agents are driven by other things sometimes, and so you have to help them there. I mean, in a lot of cases, some of the things that you need to actually get the conversion done might be information for them, things like that. So, but I mean, that's the big way that we do it. We incentive. Oh yeah, you're getting more commission if you set more appointments. So go get it.
Managing incentives. What else?
We'll coach through the assumptive language during this sale. We'll also look at the overcome objections to get objections presented.
Those are two giant levers that I think could be very tangible takeaways if we are able to share some best practices around that. So for you all, what does it sound like to coach an assumptive sale? And what does it sound like to help agents overcome objections? And then we can talk about the flip side and customer care, by the way, as well.
So if I use like assumptive sales language, we're not going to ask a lot of yes and no during the sales process. We'll just keep moving the customer along with the steps. But that's like what day will you come in instead of saying like, will that work for you? And objections just when it's presented, like you can fill some categories to look for common objections that we see. And when one of those is brought up, we look at what the agent's response is for. I need to talk to my spouse. We'll go to this is a free reservation that doesn't require anything with me now, so that after talking to your spouse, everything's already set in place.
Where do you develop those methodologies? Does that just come from your supervisor's brains? Do you have a book or something that you've read that you have implemented?
They've been there longer than I have, but we do look at the performance of our top pool of agents and the common things that we'll see happen with those calls, and that's what we try to make the norm for how all of our calls happens.
So who here has a process for identifying what your top agents are saying, and not just identifying what Enneagram type they are, or where they fall in the DISC profile, or if they are very confident or not, but who actually has a process for identifying what your top agents are saying in their customer conversations, picking that out, and giving it to everybody?
I'm reducing to 50%. I was good until you started thinking about and getting it to everybody. But we do have analytics in the system, and it's pulling out the words and phrases and data for us to understand what's going on in the call, which is useful. And just what we're finding right now is really, our best implementation is getting the information out there, and then pick some of those good calls and maybe coaching time around them so we can distribute the whole team
Very interesting. So I heard a number of things. I heard it start with actually speech analytics, looking through your speech analytics data and picking something good out, and then converting the speech analytics into coaching that you're then doing to the agents. Is it in a classroom session, or how does that work?
No, basically we have the ability to pick some of the best calls to demonstrate the values that we're trying to do and create coaching plans. And you can literally just like say, at this point in the call, we like pull the interactions in so that they can listen to that interaction and say, okay, at this point in the call, they said this and this. And then we're able to just like push that out so we can assign it to the agents to listen to. And if we want to be really brave, we can push our WFM to give them the 15-minute slot to listen to the call. We're usually not brave enough to want to take them off the phones on a scheduled basis. We kind of leave it up to them.
Yeah.
Choices. But we can't lose track if they do it or not. And that's helpful. It's only a different picture. We're still growing as an organization and trying to figure out like how to get to that optimum.
Yeah. Well, that's incredible. It sounds like honestly you have the first chunk really nailed down. Picking out good things and then assigning different clips of really great techniques to agents. Is the assignment manual? Is there a supervisor who says, this call would be great for that agent, this call would be great for that agent?
What they've been finding is that sometimes it's good for everyone. So, if I just say we've got a group of people who sell in the direct mail world, right? So for those, we've got 5 teams of direct mail sales agents, and one guy goes out and builds a coaching plan for it and pushes it out to his team. He tells the other managers, and they say, I'll push it out to everybody. We'd like them all to hear that call. I listen. It sounds like a really, really good approach. So that's kind of there's a lot of cooperation there. But it's like here, and where do we need to get to here? There's a big gap where we need to get to.
And where do you feel like you do need to get to? What's that promised land that we want to be shooting for?
Oh, the promise numbers is like, I'm going to name them your company's product. I'm specifically the time interaction guidance that we need the knowledge management and the data to surface the responses, objectives, and liable calls. They're not going to remember. You'll push that out, and they'll be successful in 5 or 6 calls, and then that will go away, and something else will get interesting too. So, it's really until we can get them the contextual information in terms of the compliance or the rebuttal strategy or the things that make the win surface, but then trying to just keep the personality in the process because we don't want them to become robots and just power it off on some screen. Because there's a huge personality that comes into execution that's really important.
Yeah.
Making sense.
That's wonderful.
What everybody else is doing, it's like tons of learning.
Yeah. What are other folks doing? Who here is familiar with a concept called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve? The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, or just also often known as the forgetting curve. Anyone familiar with that? Cool. Well, this was actually science that was first pioneered in the late 1800s. I think it was around 1880. And it was a scientist called Hermann Ebbinghaus. And what he wanted to track is when you teach people information, how long do they remember it? So he taught a whole bunch of different information. Some of them are just random numbers and said, if I ask you 10 minutes later the series of random numbers, what percentage are you going to remember? Now let's make it a story. Now let's make it a picture. And then let's do that over time. So across all categories, the amount of knowledge that you remember after 1 week, on average, you remember 59% of what you were taught at the beginning of the week if there's no reinforcement. Reinforcement, by the way, throughout the week will bump that up to around 90%. How about after a month? After a month, on average across all the categories, people remembered 10% of what they were taught. 10%. So one of the things that you mentioned is that you are coaching on something, and you do that for the next 4 or 5 calls, and then you have something else that just came up, and then you start focusing on that. One of our partners, is anyone familiar with the company Connect and Sell? They're a partner in like the speed dialer, the lightning dialer space. And they have this concept they pioneered called drift, which is when you have a certain way that you like your customers or your agents to be communicating with the customers, over time, can you track how far they deviate from that? And they measure drift. And they said that's actually one of the biggest unsolved problems in customer communications, is that what you teach on day one is not actually how people are implementing it on day 30, 60, 90, and more. So at this point, let me provide one other concept, and then I'll turn it over to Phil to talk a little bit about what Empire is doing to solve this combination of problems of spending all this time coaching and recoaching, and maybe it not sticking, of agents forgetting what to say in the moment, of agents being bored, of agents getting nervous. The last concept I'll provide is what we actually just identified is a gap. And what is your name, ma'am? Shanae. Thank you so much for participating, Shanae. One of the things that Shanae just identified is really robust processes around surfacing what works, which, by the way, I think probably all of us could develop more processes around actually going to the top agents and saying, hey, when you have a frustrated customer, what do you say? How do you respond? Like, do you listen first? Do you ask a question and take control right away? Do you assure that you can help them and then move on? What do you do? So we could actually probably all go to our top agents or use speech analytics and surface specifically what are they doing. And we have that piece of the process, many of us, maybe nailed down. And then we have the next piece of the process, which is disseminating that information out to agents and assigning one-on-one coaching videos or one-on-one clips. Sounds absolutely like best practice. Really cool to be able to take the moment and share it with the agents. And then I'm afraid to ask what the adherence is of when you assign an audio clip and it's not scheduled in workforce management, what % of the time the agents actually go in and listen and take that coaching and say, wow, that was very helpful, thank you. Yeah. So that's the gap that we've identified, is all of these things we're doing to figure out this is what we think a great conversation sounds like. This is how, Julie, would you mind going back to that other slide, please? This is how we want to drive all this stuff. Give them the right info. Make sure that they do the upsells. Make sure that the campaign, what they're actually communicating to customers, is effective. But then actually that getting implemented in the conversations. And agents actually taking the coaching and remembering it and doing it. That seems to be the gap. And we call that the execution gap between having an insight about what you should do in your customer conversations and all of our picture-perfect world of what best practice looks like, and then agents actually doing it live while they're talking with the customer. Two different worlds. So Phil, if we could actually bring you up a little bit, maybe we can swap sections. Would love to hear a little about what you and Empire today are doing to bridge that gap.
Sure, sounds good. Let's see. So, anyway, yeah, it's really interesting because this is the biggest challenge there is. And I started out in sales, and you'd come back from an appointment that you didn't sell. So sit down, you go over it with your sales manager. And they would, we'd role play. We'd do all these things. Everybody hates role playing, usually on the receiving end of it, And you role play it and you get it. Okay, you got it. Go. Now you go out in the field. You get out in the field and that opportunity arises and it's like, oh crap, I've forgotten what I said. And one of the interesting things is a new salesman you learn, you're going to find an objection you can't overcome. And until you overcome it, every sale opportunity will have that objection because you subconsciously steer yourselves towards that. And you know, when you pull an agent off the phones and you coach them over what you've just heard in a phone call, which by the way, I don't know how you do your Q&A, but most call centers take far more calls than they ever have the ability to listen to. We would require our managers to listen to 5 calls per week per agent. And we have 150 people, at the time maybe 200 in the call center. And we're taking 50,000 inbound calls handled by those 200 people. And we're listening to 5 per agent. So if you find anything, I mean, that's almost like hitting the lottery. You know, generally speaking, you don't catch a lot and you're not really coaching to the real things that we need to change and make a difference. And you know, you bring an agent in, you sit them down. 3 calls later, when they go out, you know, you've coached them through it, you do the whole thing, it's just like the salesperson out in the field. Go out in the call, 3 calls later, they're back into the same habits they had before because they don't have a chance to actually change their habit to do what you're trying to do. Now you can hijack with them, but you can't sit with them forever. And that's what made this for us so game-changing, because what happens is you can coach the agent, you can tell the agent what to do, or you can build this stuff in to call guidance. And so what happens is when you're on the call, when that moment arises, Balto pops up and says, by the way, this is what you should say here. If the agent says something they're not supposed to say, in the brokerage industry, you couldn't say the word guarantee, okay? And if you say the word guarantee, you get in a lot of trouble because you can't guarantee anything in the stock market. But if the agent was to say, oh yeah, I guarantee you're gonna love this, even though they can't say that word guarantee at all, and Balto will pop up and say, whoa, wait, you can't say guarantee. Here's how to say something to get it back and to walk yourself back from this position. So you don't even have to do as much coaching with the agent because it tells the agent how to handle it as you're walking through the process. Bringing it in, we brought it in on the sales team first. We saw such a significant lift that we brought it in on all channels after that, which I didn't expect. It was a very interesting thing. The most monumental moment for me was I'm having the conversation with Marc. We're going through the sales presentation. Balto is running on the Teams session that we're doing. And Marc tells me all these wonderful things. This sounds wonderful, fantastic. We've all heard these pitches before. And so we get to the end and he says, so Phil, what do you think? And I said, well, Marc, and I kind of chuckled. I said, I think you know what's coming next. At that moment, Balto opened up and it said, it sounds like there is a pricing objection coming. Here are the top 5 ways to handle a pricing objection. And I went, wow. Because we as human beings know that's exactly what I was going to say and what we were talking about. But to have an AI actually pick that up and, you know, say, hey, not only is this a pricing objection, but here's how you can handle it. It's tremendously valuable. And the best thing about it is, for us, was the learning factor. So Balto picks up, you know, and learns what closes are working for different agents. And then it starts promoting those. And so we turned it into a game. You know, the agent that got their, you know, their close promoted this week, you know, would get on the top of the leaderboard. And so, you know, they really enjoyed that. And it makes it much more fun. The other thing it does for us, and this is really critical, we always talk about the voice of the customer. Right? It's important to know the voice of the customer. We got to hear the voice of the customer. Very few people talk about something that is almost as equally important in customer satisfaction, which is the voice of the company. Because every company has very specific things that they do. Maybe they don't make sense, but they're their procedures. You've got to do those things. Every caller into the call center wants to figure a way around those, and they agent shop. So they will go to a different agent. And they keep agent shopping until they find somebody that answers the question incorrectly, but the way they want to. And then, of course, they say, well, you promised this, you know, you got to deliver on this, you know. And it creates, what it really does is it creates unpleasant feelings by the customer. So it really hits back on the satisfaction issue. And if you can keep everybody on the same page, Balto can say, oh, you can't say that. You have to say this. That sort of thing. It really helps stop it. Now, I can't always make the agents say what Balto says. Agent buy-in is very, very important. And so, you know, they can go off script, but we're going to find that out because Balto will know that that happened, and we will find that out afterwards. We also worked with Marc to bring them into Q&A, our calls. So now all of our Q&A is automated, and Balto handles it, gives each agent a score, and, you know, and then if there's a ding or something wrong, we listen to the recording that is right there. So you can go in and pull your records and say, okay, these are the agents that are having problems. Here, where are they having problems? Let's listen to it with the agent. Now see, you know, and this is what you should have done. So it makes coaching much easier and much better as well. We use it on inbound. It's not like scripting. So, you know, with scripting, you get that wooden, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you know, that sort of thing. With the inbound, we have taken it to keywords. We put the phrase up. Sorry. I get dry in the desert. But we put the phrase up that we want the agent to say. But here's the thing. Everybody comes from a different walk of life. I can put out there, you know, we want you to say this, but you're going to say it so much more effectively if you put that in your own words. So rather than make the agent say all of the things that we put out there, we hit the keywords. This is the keyword you got to say. You got to say this in your words, and then we let them run. And so those mark each one, checks it off, Q&A. Little gamification there that we ran into some interesting issues with, because when you've got agents that are focused on gamification, getting Balto to turn green is the primary focus of what they're doing. And, you know, I get an agent that said, you know, I said this 3 times and it didn't turn green. I'm like, well, we give you plenty of wiggle room. We only require 80% adherence to the script, so that's okay. And second of all, think about how the little old lady on the other end, who you've just asked 3 times what her address is, you know, she's going, do you have problems hearing? You know, we have a bad connection. I mean, you know, and the thing is this, you had to just keep reminding them. It's not for you to hit 100%. It's for you to have a good conversation with the customer. The other thing is it reduces training time because we can put people out on the floor. And we had a great training program, a very, very good training program in our call center. Our training manager was on top of everything. She had knowledge bases, she had everything, okay, which really made this easy for us. But it really reduces the training time because you can get them out on the floor faster. Balto guides them through the call. And it's like having a big brother watching out for you, helping you through the process. Some agents don't buy into it, but the interesting thing is if you watch the numbers over time, the agents that do buy into it, all of a sudden they go from the bottom of the pack to the top of the pack. And if the agents that were at the top of the pack before, if they can stay there, I have no problem with that. But that doesn't happen, and they go down. And so they either learn to buy in, or worst case scenario is they buy a different opportunity somewhere else. Sorry, yes? I'm sorry? Yes, because they don't have to. So here's the thing. Caller comes in, says, I want to talk about wood flooring. In the past, the agent would have to go look up wood floors on our website, find the pages. Balto pops that link for them. So that cuts out a lot of time right there. Second of all, it helps them find the information, direct it to the agent, make sure that they stay on point. And so yes, it really does reduce average handle time. And we're a call center that is very focused on average handle time. I believe we are a profit center because I know the numbers we generate for the company, but we're a very old-fashioned company, 60 years old. We are seen as a cost center, and that is their belief, the C-level's belief. And so, I mean, they really coached average handle time. And this really helps with that because for me, I want to know average handle time so I can look for outliers. You know, if somebody's too short, that's called avoidance. Somebody's too long, you know, they're talking about their dog, their kids, you know. The customers love it, but you got to stay focused. And so, I mean, you know, to me, that's where it's really important because I really want the agent to take the time they need to address the customer's problem. Because if they don't, yeah, they may have a great low handle time, but the customer's calling back, and that's not a good experience. So.
Phil, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Seriously, really, thank you. Quick round of applause for Phil, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'll wrap up today, and everyone can hopefully enjoy the rest of the day in Vegas with a quick framework. The framework is you got two ways that you can drive metrics fundamentally. Process and different technologies and automations, and then actually driving the metrics through the conversations themselves and technologies like Balto that augment those conversations. Those are your options. When it comes to driving metrics through the conversation, which seems to be most people's focus here, there's a gap between what you have and how you surface what you want a good conversation to sound like, and then agents actually doing it consistently across all their calls. So how do we close that gap? We're going to need to put resources dynamically in front of agents that allow them to have effective conversations. We're going to need to make sure that when we source best practices from our top agents, that we're not just thinking about the sourcing of it, but we're thinking about the distribution of what we source and the retention, the mental retention of that information. And then holding agents accountable and measuring how often is that actually being used in our conversations. So if you're trying to drive results through the conversation, keep that framework in mind. Knowing what the conversation needs to sound like is one part. Making sure it's happening at scale consistently over time is the second bit. And do not ignore that second piece in order to actually be able to drive metrics in your calls. Thank you all so much. Enjoy the rest of your time in Vegas.